Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another poker vlog. Happy to have you. We have quite the special episode for you guys today. Our Thursday game has a new format. It is now a 2-3 bounty game at, you may have guessed, best card room on the Central Coast, Outlaws Card Parlor. To get you guys up to speed, aside from the stakes changing from 1-3 to 2-3, there is now a $1,000 cap for this game. So we don't have to do all the crazy flips that we were doing before. We can just start with whatever starting stack we want. And there has been a bounty game added to the game on top of the Nick game. For those of you that don't know, we'll very quickly break it down. The Nick game, also referred to as a stand-up game. Everybody starts with a button. When you win a hand and you show a hand, you get rid of your button. Last player with a button has to pay $100 in the form of a splash pot, plain and simple. Only other special rule that we have is do not remind people to show their hand. If you remind another player to show their hand, you get a button instead. So they get rid of theirs, but now you take it on because everyone's responsible for showing their own hand. It's only fair. Second game, the bounty game, also pretty straightforward. The goal is to win a hand and get a button that says bounty on it. For every consecutive hand that you win, you get another button. And for every consecutive button, every player on the table pays you X amount of money. So the goal is to win multiple hands in a row. At 2 buttons, every player that was dealt in pays you $10. At 3 buttons, every player that's dealt in pays you $20. And at 4 buttons, every player dealt in pays you $40. Now with these 2 games in effect, it causes a ton of action and pretty sick spots, which you'll just have to watch to find out. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Let's jump into the action. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting our night at the cage because obviously we need some chips to play this game. We are going to grab $1,000 worth of chips, but we are starting the game with 800 and have some black chips on the side to top off later. And with that, let's get into the first hand of the night. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for this first hand of interest, we have already lost our knit button and have collected a bounty chip. We're up a little under $100. Think around 880-ish or so. And we look down at ace 5 offsuit under the gun. There is a $15 button straddle and we have a bounty chip. So it's our first time playing. Why not go for it? Let's have some fun with it. Probably a bit too wide, but that was my thought process at the time. 2 players flat the $15, the blinds fold, and Shelby checks his option on the button. Off to this flop 4 ways, and it comes an absolute dream. 5, 3, 6, all spades. We flop middle pair with the nut flush redraw. I think our hand is strong enough to bet, but there are a lot of nit buttons out, and I'm sure somebody is going to take a stab at this board, so I go ahead and put in a check. I am not disappointed when the hijack decides to fire for $60. And much to my surprise, the cutoff just cold calls the $60. So when the action gets back over to me, I think just calling is fine. I also think raising is good in this spot as well. But this time we elect just to put in a call. $245 in the middle as we go to this turn, which comes the 4 of spades. Now you guys might think this is a great card, but this actually gives us the 3rd nuts. We are now losing to a deuce of spades and a 7 of spades with the ace high flush here. Don't see that every day. I put in a check with the intention of calling most bets, and the action checks through. We go to one final card on the river, which is now the jack of spades. Can't be checking this a 3rd time. We already lost some value not going for the check raise on the flop, and then the turn also checked through. Like I said, we don't have the nuts, but we have to go for value, and if we get raised, well, that's gonna suck. Let's just hope we don't. Now for a bet. This is gonna be a bit tricky because we want to get called by a queen or king of spades, but we can't go too big because a queen or king high flush draw would be the 4th or 5th nuts on this board texture here. So we go for a bet of $175, hoping to get a cry and call out of one of those hands. The hijack snap folds and the cutoff thinks about it for a little bit, but ultimately does flick in the call. We show our ace high flush and it is good. So with this, we take down our 2nd hand in a row. So all the players on the table are putting $10 in front of them, which the dealer will then collect and then slide over our way. Pretty fun to be picking up the side games along with the pot. So after that hand, about 45 minutes go by, we lose about $200 trying to get rid of our knit button and are unsuccessful in doing so. So to add insult to injury, we have to fork up another $100. I got stubborn and tried to defend my $100 and called pre-flop with a very marginal hand. Absolutely missed and had to let it go. So there go most of our profits for the day. Starting this next hand with about 815 in our stack, we are in the small blind with ace 3 of hearts. Pretty good hand. We see an open by under the gun to $25. Low jack, high jack, and the cutoff all fold. Gets over to the button, who decides to bump up the price of poker to $55. Action's back on me, and the player to my right seems to have been playing pretty snug all night. I expect with this bet sizing for him to have big pairs or a hand like ace king or ace queen suited. Doesn't really make sense to put in a raise. I'm very okay just putting in the call, assuming that the under the gun player is not going to repop it on us. And luckily we're not getting that vibe this time. So I do put in the call, and the under the gun player comes along for the ride as well. 3 of us going to this flop. The board comes 6, 10, 4 with 1 heart. I check, under the gun checks, and when the action gets back over to the button, he continues here for $35. This bet sizing is extremely weird. If he had a hand like queens, kings, or aces, I'd expect him to down bet on the flop, but not to this sizing. This just seems way too small. Really feels like an ace high hand that's just trying to get a cheap bluff through. So I get devious intentions, and although we don't have anything really on this board, I'm going to go ahead and put in the call with plans to try and steal this on the turn, assuming we don't see any paint, and we might be able to pick up some equity with some either straight or flush outs on the turn. So I come along for the ride. We lose the under the gun player, and we get a miracle card on the turn. It is the 5 of hearts. We were going to bet regardless, but this just makes betting more comfortable because we could get there on the river. So I decide to fire for $100. Our opponent thinks it over for about 15 to 20 seconds. Really seems like he's going to put in the fold, but then eventually he calls, which I found a bit strange. So we're off to the river, which brings us the 9 of clubs. Not really sure what our opponent was tanking with on the turn, but then decided to call anyway. We both have our nip buttons still, so it could just be an ace high hand, not believing that we have any piece of the board. But then as I look closer, it is possible he might have a hand like pocket 7s or pocket 8s, where he doesn't necessarily want to bet big on the flop because he is losing to the 10, but then he turned a little bit of equity with second pair along with either a gut shot or an open ender. Nothing else really makes sense to me. So with that in mind, with the intention of trying to fold out just an ace high or a marginal second pair hand, I think we need to size up quite a bit on this river. So I decide to go with a bet of $250, and the button goes into the tank. The longer our opponent thinks about this decision, the more comfortable I'm feeling that he's going to lay his hand down. But unfortunately, we are wrong, and we see the bad news when our opponent puts his chips in the middle and patiently waits for us to open our hand. I flip over our ace high, and our opponent flips over 2 red 10s. What the heck? I obviously didn't put him on that hand, and I guess the tiny bet on the flop makes a little bit more sense. My man had the nuts, so yeah, he was trying to get max value, and he definitely got it out of me. Well played, my friend. Well played. So after losing that last hand, we weren't able to make anything happen, and we unfortunately lost another round of the nit game. So kissing another $100 goodbye, unfortunately. As the next round of the nit game starts, we see an open to $25 and a call in the middle. I look down at pocket deuces in the small blind and decide to just rip it all in there. Let's get rid of our button. We have a pair, should be good enough to go when they're short stacked. We end up getting into a 3-way all-in situation, and unfortunately we are in 3rd place with our pocket deuces versus pocket kings and pocket hens. And with that, bullet number 1 goes down in shambles. And with that, we dug into our pocket and pulled out some additional money. We have a total of $600 in cash and then the 2 black chips, so that is good for $800. Let's see if we can make anything happen. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for some extra run good. It doesn't take very long after we rebuy to pick up a decent hand. We look down at pocket 10s under the gun +1. Under the gun flats $3. We're in early position with pretty good hand, no reason to get tricky here. I bump it up to $40. It folds over to the small blind and he puts in the call, but then the big blind decides to stick it in for $260. Under the gun folds, and when the action gets back over to me, this is a non-decision. I reshove to get the small blind out of the way and isolate this heads up. Pocket 10s is just way too strong to fold pre-flop, especially for less than $300 in this action heavy game. Small blind folds as expected, so we go heads up to this run out. $560 in the middle, and the board comes out, I kid you not, 10 jack 10, ladies and gentlemen. We flop the absolute nuts. Turn brings a 3 of diamonds, and the river is the deuce of hearts. I'm going to roll the rest of the clip here.
Yep, I have quads.
Shortly after that hand, we got into an all-in situation with the same player. He shoved pre for 168. I looked down at 7-6 suited and got a little out of control here and decided to give him some action, figuring he was shoving pretty wide, and as long as we had 2 live cards, we were not in too bad of shape here. Unfortunately, our hand was no good versus pocket nines, so another 186 moving in the wrong direction. At this point in the night, we're about 3 hours into the session. We've been all over the place with the poker, if I'm being 100% honest. The shove with the deuces was a bit unnecessary, and giving action with 7-6 suited was also a bit unnecessary. So when we look down at 7-6 suited on the button, we're going to play snug, try to see a flop and see what we can do with it, right? Absolutely not, ladies and gentlemen. We are playing some street poker. This is an action game. People are raising and calling much wider, and we are in position with a suited connector. So let's freaking take it up a notch. There's an open of $15 and a caller in the middle. I decide to make it 50 to go on the button. We get called in 2 spots and we go to a flop 3 ways. 154 in the middle, and the board comes out 4-9 deuce, all diamonds, baby. Let's go. Instantly rewarded for getting out of line pre-flop. And this session just took a turn. Action checks over to me, and I'm going to continue here for $50. I bet super small, trying to make it seem like I was afraid of the 3 diamonds on the board, hoping that if anybody has top pair or potentially even a set here, they repop it now and we can just get the money in. And my boy Shelby over in the low jack does not disappoint. He bumps it up to 175. We lose the player in the middle. Action's back on me. We have under 500 in our stack, so obviously we are just going to put it all in. He quickly calls, and just like that, we have over $1,000 in the middle going to this run out, which brings us the 4 of clubs on the turn. Don't like to see the board pair, to be 100% honest. River brings the 9 of hearts. Shelby asks us if we have an overpair. I tell him no, that we flopped a flush. He hits us with the old head nod and throws his hand into the muck. All right, this next one is a pretty interesting hand. Starting off with about 950 in our stack, we have ace king of diamonds in the hijack. New knit game is on, so there are some buttons out and about, but most players have gotten rid of them at this point. There's a $20 button straddle. One player flats to 20, and when the action gets over to me, I decide to raise to 125. Cutoff gets out of the way, button puts in the call. Small blind puts in the call, which is a bit concerning, and everybody else folds. 398 in the middle, and we go to a run out of 8, 10, 3 with 2 clubs. The small blind checks, action's over to me, and I assume our opponents are going to miss this board a lot of the time. Even in this action heavy game, we raised a reasonable amount pre-flop, and the 2 players that call do not have their knit buttons, so I expect them to be a lot more snug as far as their hand range. So I'm thinking a continuation bet here might get the job done. I make it $200 to go, and then to my surprise, the button ends up going all in, covering both myself and the small blind for well over $1,000 here. I don't expect him to be doing this with a single pair, like a pair of 10s if he has something like ace 10. I just got the vibe that Mr. Jeff on the button was doing this with a flush draw. So after debating for a few seconds, I came to the conclusion that our ace high here is most likely good versus Jeff, and I decided that I was gonna put in a call when the action got over to me, but then to my surprise, Yoshi in the small blind decides to shove as well. What the heck is going on here? Okay, there is absolutely no way we're good here. I started thinking of the possible hands that Yoshi could have done this with. If he flopped a pair of 10s with a hand like ace 10 or king 10 suited, I'm sure he would have come out and led himself. I also don't think a pair of 10s goes all in here after there's a big bet and a shove behind. So after much consideration, I came to the conclusion that this can only be a hand that is 2 pair or better, but given the board texture, even 8-10 suited seems a bit wide, and the other 2 pair combinations just don't make any sense, so it has to be a set in my opinion. So after about a minute or 2 of putting the pieces together, I did come to the conclusion that it does not make any sense to put in a call here, and we begrudgingly mugged our hand even though I felt it was good against the bigger stack. 1498 in the middle, and our opponents are going to run this twice. Jeff flips over his hand, and he does in fact have a flush draw with ace deuce of hearts, and Yoshi flopped the absolute nuts with a set of 10s. First board comes 8 king, diamond, spade, so 10s are good on that board. And on board number 2, king of spades shows up to give Jeff the nuts, and the board does not pair. So these 2 distinguished gentlemen get to chop up your boy's money. Fun stuff. After that last hand, our stack was looking a little bit rough and it needed some love. It's not quite the end of the session yet. We got about another hour and a half of time to play. So I decided to add on for an additional $600. Give us an opportunity to actually make some money if we pick up a hand. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Not only did we not catch a hand for about 45 minutes or so, we had to pay some bounties, lost some money trying to get rid of our nit button, and here we are having to pay the nit tax yet again. So down a couple hundred, extra money going into the middle by yours truly. Luckily, we have position in this hand, and unluckily, we do not pick up a very good hand. We look down at Queen 4 offsuit in the cutoff. We have about a 750-ish left in our stack after having to pay the tax. Action limps over to us, and I'm not going to try to get out of line here because it is going to be very suspicious, and I don't want to get a bunch of money in with Queen 4 offsuit. So I just limp here. I don't know. This seems stupid either way. Raising with this hand sounds dumb. Flatting and going multi-way to the flop sounds dumb, but here we are. We just flat. Luckily, nobody raises, and the flop comes, not great. 9 queen 10 with all hearts. Considering it's a limp pot, there's a lot of hands that smash the heck out of this board. The action checks to the hijack, who decides to bid 55. I think about it for a second, and he could be easily doing this with any heart in his hand. Ace of hearts, king of hearts, maybe even the jack of hearts. We have top pair and a very terrible kicker, but I'm going to go ahead and put in the call at least one time, trying to defend our $100. The button also calls small blind folds, big blind folds, and then the low jack folds. So there's now 283 in the middle. Going to the turn, which comes a pretty phenomenal card. It is the Queen of Diamonds. Could be bad if we are outkicked, but the fact that there is a second queen on the board now makes it much less likely. And to make things even better, the hijack now checks. Find this pretty odd after he led the flop. So squarely putting this man on a flush draw. I decided to bet here for about near pot and make it $200 to go. The button, which is the player I was more concerned with potentially having us outkicked, folds pretty quickly, which is absolutely great news. And then the hijack goes into the tank for quite a bit. So I think this goes in line with our theory of him having a flush draw here. If he had a queen, he definitely would have called already. So he thinks it over for quite a bit. And then he does end up putting in the call. 683 in the middle, and we go to this river, which comes the 7 of diamonds. The hijack thinks for a little bit, not too long, and then ends up checking. Really seems like he was contemplating bluffing at this and then gave up. I'm pretty sure I had the best hand. I stick all the money in the middle, and it doesn't take long for our opponent to muck. So we got a little rebate on our nit tax, made a little bit of profit, and the stack's doing a lot better now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so it's been well over an hour since that last hand, and Connor and I have had our nit buttons this entire time. We honestly just haven't had anything to play, been super card dead, and neither of us have been getting involved in pots, so it's been very easy to just keep folding and not have to pay the nit tax. But in this hand, we are under the gun +1 with king 10 offsuit, and this is the best hand I've seen in a minute, so it might be time to get rid of our nit buttons. I make it $30 to go, and we get snap braised to 125 by Mr. Connor. Action folds over to me. I don't think anybody wants to get involved with the nits, and they want a $100 splash pot. Typically, this would just be a fold, but considering how wide me and Connor are going to be 3-betting in this spot, and how many times I've already lost the nit game today, don't really want to relinquish it just yet. Doesn't make too much sense because we're essentially paying the nit tax by calling to see this flop anyway, but you know what? Sometimes you just got to play some street poker, and I at least want to see a board. So we go ahead and flick in the call. 258 in the middle, but before we go to the run out, you guys got to check out what happened at the table.
Side bet?
Yeah.
Approve it? You pick.
Heads, I take JJ. Okay, I got Connie.
Okay, what's the bet?
Whatever you want.
All right, guys. So there's a small $25 side bet now involved with this hand. Doesn't affect me or Connor. It's strictly by 2 other players on the table. But what does affect me is this jerk off in seat 8, flipping a coin to decide who he was going to bet on, but the coin doesn't have a heads or tails on it. It just says $5 on both sides. So this man, Mr. Shelby, who I thought was my freaking homie, just pretended to flip a coin just to pick somebody that wasn't me to bet on in this hand. Oh, it's personal now. I am going to make sure this man loses this bet. Now it's not just about playing street poker and not losing the nit game. Now I have to embarrass Shelby for betting on the wrong person, because what the heck is that, bro? Like, come on. All right, anyhow, going to this flop, 7 deuce 9, 258 in the middle. We have diddly squat on this board, but I don't expect Connor to hit any of this board, and I know if we check it over to him, he's gonna bet. So I get some devious intentions of going for a sweet check raise here. So I check, and as planned, Mr. Connor in the low jack decides to bet $70. And we're going to put in the raise to $200 with absolute air. And at this point, Connor goes into the tank. Should be a pretty tough spot for him to continue. I'm going to have a lot of middling pairs that are good versus his overcards on this board texture. Also going to have a set of 7s or 9s a lot of times in this spot, which is kind of what I was trying to represent. But considering it's the nit v nit situation, I could just be absolutely full of it in this spot and be doing this with overcards, which we most definitely are. And he might be tempted to call us one more street with just ace high. As Connor is thinking about his decision, we see some funny shenanigans on the table, with Jeff motioning over to Shelby that he's going to win the money and Shelby pretending to take their side bet off the table. Overall, everyone's just having a jolly old time while me and Connor are over here in the blender. Eventually, Connor does flick in the call, so this pot quickly balloons up to 658, and we're just sitting here with king high.
I hope we haven't influenced this hand.
Yes, you guys definitely influence this hand, but you know, we can't tell Connor that, otherwise we're going to get stacked here. Off to the turn, and we see the Jack of Hearts, which is a phenomenal card for our hand. We now have a double gutter, so we can continue barreling here with a little bit of equity. The only issue is the stack sizes are a bit weird in comparison to the pot. I only have about 900 behind, so if I make a 2/3 or pot size bet, the river is going to be absolutely atrociously small, and Connor will never fold anything after calling the turn bet. So I think it makes more sense to keep it a bit small on the turn and then go for a big bet on the river. I would also do this if I had a value heavy hand, considering this is a pretty safe board for a 3-bet pot. The bet sizing we decided on is $200. Connor thinks it over for about 10 to 15 seconds before putting in the call. A little over 1,000 in the middle, and we're off to this river, which comes an absolute freaking miracle. It is the Queen of Hearts. Action is on me, and we had already planned on jamming any river that came out, and we're either going to get a snap call or a snap fold out of Connor, I am assuming here, because he either is giving us a lot of credit or absolutely no credit. But there's just one small detail. We freaking got there, and we have the nuts now. Regardless of the action we have to show to get rid of our nit button, but I'm greedy and want to rub it in Shelby's face as much as we possibly can. So I want to get paid on top of getting rid of our nit button, on top of also costing this man $25. This is just straight ego poker at this point now. And how do we accomplish that? Bet super small again. Let's roll the clip.
200. That's a stupid. Cool.
Sorry.
King 10.
Sizing was so
Quarter, all right.
nice hand. Oh my god.
For this hand, we look down at Queen Jack suited on the big blind. Stack is doing much better with around 1750. The action folds over to the low jack, who makes it 25 to go. Hijack calls it 25. Cutoff gets out of the way. Button calls, small blind calls, and obviously we are going nowhere with this hand here. I think calling or raising are okay. We do have our nit button, so we are going to be raising a bit wider than normal, but I think this hand still qualifies as a pretty solid candidate for a 3-bet, even out of position. But this time we do elect to just put in the call. 125 in the middle, and we get a phenomenal board run out. It is ace 8-6 with 2 clubs, so we have the second nut flush draw. Small blind checks. I decide to bet here for 50. Low jack folds. Hijack calls the 50, button calls the 50, and the small blind folds. With 2 players calling behind, I assume they have at least a small piece of this board. I didn't expect that small bet on the flop to get it done, but now it's time to size up on the turn, whether we hit or not. The turn comes the 10 of spades, and now we size up a little bit to $175. The hijack gets out of the way. But Mr. Shelby on the button does not seem to be a believer. He tanks and tanks and tanks for quite some time, which is a pretty good sign. His hand can't be that strong if he's thinking about it for this long. But eventually he does decide to make the call and keep us honest here. Off to a river with 625 in the middle, and it comes the 5 of hearts. Not the card we needed, but as previously mentioned, it does not seem like our opponent has a very strong holding, so we are going to continue betting here. There's about 625 in the middle, and we want to put in a reasonable size bet, but I don't think we need to get too crazy here. I decide to go with a bet of $350 here on the river. This is about half pot, but the size of this bet should be enough to get rid of a lot of marginal holdings. And to be honest, if we go too big, Shelby is a smart cookie, and he might find it more suspicious if we use a larger sizing here, like we have the exact hand that we have on missed flush draw. So I wanted to make the sizing scream value as opposed to please fold, which I think I did a pretty good job of doing. But the longer that we sit here and the longer that Shelby tanks, the more I am getting concerned. This man does not want to fold, have no idea what he has here, but he goes into the blender for about 2 minutes. And ultimately he decides on crud. He called. I flip over our hand and show him that we completely bricked our combo draw on the turn. And my freaking boy over here shows 8-3 offsuit. What the heck is that, brother? Second pair on the flop. Not afraid of the 10 or the ace. Pretty much put me on the exact hand I had to put in the call here with 8-3 offsuit. Freaking incredible hero call, my friend. I actually thought I played this pretty well, but we couldn't get this one past him. Maybe a bit of payback for that $25 we lost him earlier. Nice hand, Shell. At this point in the night, it is past our 10 p.m. curfew for trying to get home at a reasonable hour, so we're ready for work the next day and not tired all weekend. But since it's our first night back, I did decide that we were going to stick around until the game broke just for tonight. That being said, it's been about 30 minutes since that last hand was Shelby. It's around 11:30. Starting to get really tired to the point where 7-3 suited with the nip button is looking pretty dang good, especially when you make a flush. Didn't make too much on this hand, just $180 or so, but we got rid of the nip button, which is worth a heck of a lot more than that, as you guys have clearly seen throughout the night. And after that, about an hour or so goes by before we look at the next hand, which is ace 4 suited on the button. We have almost 1100 in our stack. Action folds over to the hijack, who makes it 30. Cutoff decides to bump it up to $75. This particular individual likes to 3-bet very wide pre-flop. So our ace 4 suited might be ahead some of the time here, but we are going to be crushed a small percentage of the time. So I'm okay with either a fold, a call, but definitely not a raise here. This time we do elect to put in the call. Action gets back over to the hijack, who calls as well. 230 in the middle, and we get a pretty decent flop. It comes out 6 ace 5, so we have top pair. The hijack checks and the cutoff continues for $125. Top pair is just far too strong to fold here. Since he was the pre-flop aggressor, he's going to stab at a lot of ace high boards, regardless of what his hand is, even into multiple players. I've seen him do it countless times. So not ready to relinquish our hand just yet. And this is when we get the bad news. After thinking for about 30 seconds or so, Mr. Shelby over there in the hijack decides to bump up the price of poker to $425. And then the action gets back over to the cutoff, and he doesn't take very long before also putting in the call for $425. Action gets back to me, and I think I take an unnecessary amount of time here thinking this over. Clearly, we're no good in this spot. Even if we are beating the cutoff, there's no way that we are ahead of Shelby after he check raises for this amount. Yes, the board is pretty wet. There's straight draws and flush draws out there, but the sizing that he used feels a lot more like he's going for value as opposed to trying to get people to fold. So he clearly has a pretty big hand. I'm expecting 2 pair or better. So eventually we do make what I think is the right decision here and fold, kissing our $200 goodbye, but much better than losing way more in this hand when we are at least in second place. Running out the rest of the hand because it's a pretty big one. There's over 1200 in the middle, and the turn comes the 7 of spades. Shelby goes all in, cutoff tanks, ends up calling the all in for 425. Pop balloons up to over 2K. They decide to run this twice. First board brings a queen of hearts. Second board brings the ace of diamonds. Shelby flips over pocket sixes for a flopped set, and AJ has ace king suited for top. So looks like we actually saved some money here because we were in third place the entire way. Nice hand to you, Mr. Shelby. So unfortunately, we were not able to lose our nip button. Very next hand, we looked down at jack six suited in the cutoff. We're able to see a cheap flop, end up flopping a flush draw and breaking out. So we lost another 190 here, more than the Nick game's worth, but this is about honor. We must lose the button. Cannot be paying any more nit taxes, but unfortunately, this wasn't the hand for it. So before we get into this hand, I did somehow misplace a clip or just did not record us getting rid of our nip button in the hand immediately before this. The button is sitting next to me, but we just got rid of it. Had ace king suited and put in a big raise pre-flop, $100 and something or so, because I was getting pretty short stacked. And then I decided to jam completely in the dark from the small blind. Actually ended up flopping a flush draw, but our opponent, Mr. Foddy, on the other end of the table snap folded. So didn't really have to hit. We were good with just our ace high. But moving on to this hand, we now have about 845 in our stack. After picking up a little bit, we are on the button and we look down at ace queen offsuit. Finally, a real hand. We also have ourselves a bounty chip, so an opportunity to pick up some extra money. Cutoff decides to make it $20 to go. I decide to just flat here. I honestly think it would have been better to raise and start building this pot now, but I had been opening so many good hands and just whiffing every flop that I think it kind of got in my head a little bit. So we decided to just flat with position. Small blind folds and the big blind comes along for $20 as well. $62 in the middle as we go to this flop, which comes out, well, as good as you could possibly get. Jack 10 king rainbow. We flop the stone cold nuts, ladies and gentlemen. And to make matters even better, the big blind now leads for $100. Cutoff ends up getting out of the way. I think calling is our best option here. Raising doesn't really make sense. We're in position and there's not too many cards that are going to kill the action on the turn. Our opponent bet over pot, so he's either full of it or has a really strong hand. If we raise, he's going to get away from his bluffs. But if we just call, he might continue stabbing at it with his bluffs, and obviously if he has a good hand, he's going to continue betting. So we just put in the call. 262 in the middle, and the turn is about as bad as it can get. It is the king of spades. A bit uncomfortable because it's definitely possible that our opponent has a boat, but considering he still has his nip button, he's going to be playing a much wider range of hands pre-flop. So it's still possible that he has single pair hands, maybe with a redraw, something like queen 10, queen jack. Also some suited kings like king 8, king 9 suited would be in here. He could also just be going buck wild with a naked ace. So as I'm thinking about all these things, our opponent does decide to make a $200 bet, and I had already predetermined that we were not going to fold to just one more bet on the turn. Putting in the call here and evaluating what our opponent does on the river. 662 in the middle, and we go to the river, which comes the 9 of spades. The big blind now slows down and checks. I never expect him to check a full house here, so I'm thinking we have the best hand. I want to go for value, but it's going to be difficult to get paid when there's a 4-liner on the board. I don't think any single pairs like just a pair of jacks or a pair of 10s is going to call on this board. So unfortunately, the only thing we can really target here is a king. So I end up going for about a half pot size bet of 300. Our opponent calls pretty quickly and he flips over king queen. Oh my God, he had a straight. I guess he must have been afraid that we might have had a boat, but when he's holding a king, it's going to be pretty hard for us to have a full house in the spot. Very surprised he didn't bet with a straight on the river there. But at the end of the day, the hand may have ended in the same result because I was not going to re-raise him on the river. Either way, we take this spot down and get some additional money with our second bounty. Always nice to win the side games. So the rest of the night was pretty tame outside of something slightly weird but funny that happened about 10 minutes after that last hand. There was a $100 splash pot, luckily not coming out of our chip stack this time, but being a complete dummy and paying attention to I don't know what, we completely missed that it was the splash pot this hand. So when I looked down at pocket aces in early position, I just called the straddle, which is very dangerous during these splash pots because everybody likes to limp and see a flop. I figured somebody was going to raise trying to get rid of their nip button, but just not paying attention. We made this massive mistake. So we go to a flop with way too many players with aces. Another player leads out on the flop. We end up calling. And then on the turn, this happened.
I checked it. He checks in the dark.
I mean, I can't fold.
No, you.
Officially.
Okay, yeah, I call.
Yeah. Like,
So is this an angle? Is this not an angle? What's going on here? Our opponent checked to us and then stuck all his chips in the middle before we even acted as we were grabbing chips. Obviously, I'm never folding there. He was the one that had to pay the nit tax, so he's going to be hyper aggressive trying to defend it, and everybody else was already out of the hand. Obviously, our hand is super under-repped considering the pre-flop action, but I just found it funny. Anyhow, we end up winning this hand to close out the night. It was a nice $800 pot going in our direction. And with that, it's time for us to get up and get out of here. To go over the buy-ins, we were in for, well, 2 bullets and an add-on. Initially for 8, had to rebuy for another 8 after being felted, and then we added on 600 at one point to give ourselves a beefier stack. Grabbing all these chips, heading over to the cage. Turns out that we had 2,200 and some change, so we hooked our boy Kevin up with a little tip because we broke even on the night, ladies and gentlemen. With the way things were going today and getting the rust off, I definitely think breaking even is a win. We were a bit all over the place and doing some questionable stuff near the end of the session when the fatigue started to sit in, but that is quite all right. Not a bad performance for our first time trying this awesome bounty game. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got for you as far as the rest of this vlog. For future vlogs, the plan moving forward is to give you guys as much good content as we can. Mentioned this in the past video, but we've been very picky with the hands going onto it. This was a session that kind of had everything in it because it was very action heavy because of the bounty game. Wanted to kind of showcase this new Thursday game we got going on because this is going to be the format moving forward for Thursday games. Really explain it for you guys, get you, a full understanding of what is going on here. I'm also just learning it. So, a lot of our big hands are most likely going to come from this game. So I wanted to make sure everybody kind of saw how the style of the game goes. That being said, moving forward, we are going to be focusing a lot on short form content. So make sure to go follow on Instagram if you guys haven't already to get a lot of those shorts. They pop up on YouTube too, but for some reason they seem to get more traction on Instagram. I want to spin up a new vlog series. Have a really cool idea. Very excited about it. Need to just implement it and figure out all the small kinks of how I'm going to construct it because it's going to be a little bit complicated, but it's going to be very familiar to how we started the vlog. So that's the only hint that you guys get for now. But really cool announcement coming out for you guys. Some major plans for this summer. Keep an eye out for that video. It's probably going to be a quick 3-4 minute video with no poker involved, just an announcement. Absolutely stoked. Incredible opportunity coming for us in the poker career timeline, I guess is the best way to put it. That's all you get. Get out of here. Good luck on the felt. Catch you next time. Peace.